Hi YouTube. This is pretty much like my first video that I've done like in a while that actually has to do with a topic, so to say. I've been asked a lot of times like, "Oh, how did you learn Spanish?" And so I would kind of like to talk about that subject today in this video. Um, yes, I speak Spanish. I learned Spanish maybe about 10 years ago. I'm 22 now. Or at least I can say that's when I started to learn Spanish. Um, I will give like a little snippet, I guess you could say, of how I speak Spanish. Hola, soy Livia. Yo nací acá en los Estados Unidos, en el estado de Texas. Yo aprendí español en la escuela, pero más adelante voy a hablar más sobre ese tema para que ustedes aprendan, pues se den cuenta cómo es que yo aprendí español. Okay, so that was a preview of my Spanish. So yeah, here's the story for how I came to learn Spanish. Um, I learned Spanish in school when I was about 10 years old, maybe 9, maybe younger. I learned it because the school that I went to was primarily Latino. Like my closest friends were Latino, like they all spoke Spanish and I wanted to know what they were saying. And so that led to me having this curiosity. I remember my older brother, he actually took a Spanish class before I did, obviously. And when he was learning the alphabet, her name was Senora Clark, and she was from Panama. And like my brother came home and he was learning the alphabet, and it went like A B C D E F, like that. And so I literally studied the alphabet with my older brother. And to this day, like he hates Spanish, and I'm over here as a Spanish major at UT. Um, so that's how it started. And so like I was just always that student who took Spanish very serious in class. Like it was my favorite class in middle school. And like I was always really good at it. Like I was literally taking notes. I did good on all my tests. Like I was teacher's pet. I even went to like a competition where I had to read a poem in Spanish, and I just thought I was fluent. Like I just thought it was the bomb. And so like yeah, I did really well all through high school. And I thought I was pretty good at Spanish. My accent was pretty spot on at the time, I guess you could say. And like I was always listening to my Latino friends speak Spanish, even though I was still kind of scared to death to like speak it. And so finally, when I got to college, I actually entered college studying journalism. But I also noticed myself spending more time studying Spanish than I was studying anything else. And so, I did really good in my Spanish class. I guess I did average. That was the first time I was actually being challenged, and I was actually realizing that there was a lot more to Spanish than what I had already learned in school. Like I was like, oh my god, there's a subjunctive, there's like all of this stuff, that I never even knew existed, but I thought I knew everything about Spanish. And so, like, that's when I discovered, like, subjunctive. I discovered all of these different accents. Like, all of these things that I never really knew existed, I discovered in college. So, my freshman year, I'm just fascinated. Like, that's when I felt like I was actually challenged for the first time to, like, really learn Spanish. And so in college, I had a TA, a teaching assistant, and we were required to go to her class like every Friday morning at like 8 in the morning. It was the worst, 8 in the morning, and so she was from Spain, and I just remember she spoke English really weird. Like she had the weirdest accent in English, but she was Spanish, like she was from Spain, and that's when I discovered that, oh, in Spain they speak differently. They speak with the ceceo instead of the ceseo that we see in like Latin America and in the Canary Islands and pretty much in every other part of the world. And so that's when that curiosity came about different accents and things like that. And I like told myself, I was like, I'm going to study abroad while I'm in college. Like that's what I'm going to do. And that's the only way I feel like I can really better my language skills. And so like I was studying really hard. At that point, I felt like I was maybe above average. I still had a lot to go. Like, I still had a long way to go and everything like that. But I really tried really hard. I was also really focused on going to the University of Texas, transferring out of that school because I wanted to be a journalist, and that school wasn't known for journalism or anything like that. But it was more so known for its music program. And so, like, so yes, that's where my curiosity really began to grow about the language, when I began to realize that there was more to Spanish than what I actually knew. And so I just discovered that there was just so much more out there. And I just had all these curiosities, but I was scared to, like, necessarily break out and, like, really speak the language. And so when I get to the University of Texas, that's when I was actually challenged really, 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 like, the hardest ever in my life with the language. I had this teacher, my very first Spanish teacher. She was from Costa Rica, and I actually ran into her at happy hour. It was so ironic. A couple of weeks ago, I didn't speak to her because, I mean, her class was really hard and I did not like her. I mean, I liked her, but her class was really hard, and so because of that, I didn't really, like, want to be her BFF or anything. And so, like, yeah, so I remember, like, I was really struggling in her class. I was, like, I had the best accent in the class. Like, I spoke it better than anybody else, but when it came to grammar rules or explaining why we use the imperfect or the preterite for certain things, I was really baffled. Like, I was just like, I don't know why. This is just what it is. This is what I'm guessing, basically. And so, like, I really struggled in the class. Like, I was failing some of the tests, and I was just dumbfounded because Spanish was my life. I was spending forever, like, I was studying it more than I was studying my journalism materials. And so, like, when I was close to failing that class is when I went and met with my professor. And she told me, she was like, you have to do more, Olivia, than just come to class. Like, you have to make Spanish a part of your life. And at that point, it, like, really clicked in me. I was like, that's when I began to, like, start listening to music in Spanish. And so, like, Spanish music literally became a part of my life. It got to the point to where I wasn't even listening to what, the popular music here in America was. Rather, I was listening to, the song that just came out was the song by Don Omar, Danza Kuduro, that song. And I still love that song. And every time I hear it, it reminds me of my struggling days with Spanish. And so, yeah, I started listening to Spanish music on my way to class. And the campus is pretty big. And so I would have, like, maybe 10 to 15 minutes in between each class where I was walking, to the next one. And I was listening to Spanish music. I also began to look for resources online. That's when I discovered that there was a whole online community of people who were learning different languages. And I was obsessed. Like, I literally became obsessed with learning, like, actually being good at Spanish and learning it. And so I found online communities where, like, people from all around the world were getting together just to learn a language, and so many people that, I'm sorry, my computer went, sleep kind of. So, yeah, that's when I discovered that, like, there are people all around the world who were willing to do exchanges with your languages. And so one of my favorite sites now is sharedtalk.com. And so I joined that site, and I still use it to this day because I'm learning another language now. And it's amazing. And I feel like I've learned a lot, and I've met lots of people. Some are creepy, but some people aren't. And I've actually made friendships, you know? And I discovered online websites where I could practice my Spanish with other people who were interested in learning English. In exchange, I would teach them English, and basically my teaching consisted of me just speaking to them, just having conversations like, oh, how long have you been learning English? For what? Why do you want to come to the United States? What fascinates you? And in return, they would ask me similar questions. And that basically is how I learned like different phrases, how people really spoke it. It was less of a formal atmosphere and more of an informal atmosphere. I so that's so you know I built those type of relationships, and I would speak almost every day, especially when Christmas break came around in December and I got my grade back from that Spanish class, and it was a C. And I was just like distraught. I was like, are you serious? Like a C? A C. I worked incredibly hard and I'm getting a C. And that was my first time I ever got a C in a Spanish class, and it really devastated me because I was obsessed. Like I was spending my entire day, every single day, surrounded by Spanish. Like my television was on Univision, it was on Televisa, like always. But I'm getting a C in Spanish class. It just drove me crazy. It really did. And so like after that, that's when I cranked it up even more. I had just applied to also go abroad to Spain for a summer, and like I was even more determined to like be able to communicate when I got to Spain, because it was my dream to go there, because my TA, my very first TA, she was Spanish, and so I was determined to be able to communicate and like come back from Spain even better of a speaker. And so at this point, I've like joined several websites. One of the websites required me to write a blog, and I'll actually put the name of that blog down below in the description for all of you all who might be interested. And I would literally just write about my day sometimes, and I would use a dictionary to discover all of the words that I didn't know. And I would post a blog, and that's how I would learn, you know, new vocabulary and increase my vocabulary each time I wrote. And pretty much every single day, I would have one person on the website who was learning English. They would go back and they would edit my blog entry with all of the grammar corrections, all of the spelling errors, any type of error that they caught. They would go back and they would fix it for me. And in return, I would go to their blog, which was written in English, and I would give them all of my corrections that I found in their English grammar that weren't correct or sounded strange in some sense. And so I really, that's how I bettered my Spanish before going to Spain. I also got an A, obviously, after intense studying over winter break, meaning like maybe an hour a day speaking Spanish or maybe even more. I got an A in my next Spanish class, and that's when I discovered how complicated Spanish could be. Like, Spanish, I know people say, oh, Spanish is like the easiest language, but I also think it's one of the hardest languages. All of the tenses, all of the like change verbs like hacerse, convertirse, ponerse, llegar a ser, like all of those verbs can mean like to change or to be convert to, you know? And so that's when I discovered that, you know, Spanish isn't as easy, and it's really something you have to work for. I'm going to come back and I'm going to do part 2.